In Proverbs chapter 20, verse 6, it says this: "Many a man claims to have unfailing love, but a faithful man who can find?" What does it mean to be a faithful man? On Mother's Day, I get torn between trying to pamper the moms, encourage them, plus also challenge them. And I think I usually end up leaning towards the pampering, encouraging stuff. But fathers shall get no such treatment from me today. I don't know what it's like to be a mom. I wouldn't even pretend to insult you to think that I know what moms go through. But I do know what it's like to be a man, and I know what it's like to be a dad. And I know what, if I was in your place, whether I'm a father or not, if I was a man, I know what I would like to hear. I would like to hear something challenging. I would like to hear something that says to me, this is what God expects of you, now go do it. So that's what you're going to get from me today, okay? But I'm going to start with a song that I learned when I was a kid, and maybe you did too. And it goes like this: "Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down with love. So be careful, little eyes, what you see." And it goes, "Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, little mouth, what you say. Be careful, little hands, what you do. And be careful, little feet, where you go." I'm going to start with the eyes. I think this is something that no matter how hard a woman tries to understand, she will never understand this, guys. Lust. Now, one of the interesting things I find is I read people who write and people who blog and preachers who preach, and they take a lot of the blame for a difficulty a man might have with lust, with what he looks at, with the way women dress. That is not the problem. When Jesus wrote, you're not supposed to commit adultery with anybody else, but I say unto you, if a man lusts after a woman, he's committed adultery with her already in his heart. Do you know how women dressed back then? Everything was covered except for the eyes in a lot of cases. The problem is not the way women dress, is it, guys? The problem is in here. It doesn't take a woman who's dressed scantily to get our imaginations going, does it? In fact, if we were honest, and we're a church, let's be honest, sometimes, many times, a very modestly dressed woman can actually fuel the imagination quicker than someone who is dressed immodestly. Now, there's also, and it just pains me to talk about this, but I'm going to, because I end up dealing with it. And I'm going to tell you one super sad story. Pornography. I don't understand men who think that they can view pornography and it will not affect the relationship with their wife or their girlfriend or their children. I don't understand how that gets into your head. I further do not understand, and this is a situation I'm dealing with right now, and I'm not going to tell you the name of the person. You wouldn't know the person if I told you their name, so it doesn't matter. But a pastor friend of mine who does not trust himself on his own computer in his house, so he's given me the password, and I have to log on and go in and allow him a 2-hour access to sit down and stream a movie with his wife or something. This man is a pastor of a church, he's married, he's a father, yet he has not he has not access to the self-control that we all have access to through the Holy Spirit in order to keep himself from looking at things on his computer that he shouldn't. The help and the power is available for you to be careful what goes in your eyes. There are no excuses. Secondly, be careful, little ears, what you hear. There's no reason that a man should be listening to crass jokes. There's no reason that you should be one way when you're at work and a different way when you're at home or at church or anyplace else. It's not okay to listen to off-color things one place, but then not. This should not be coming in our ears. We should not be listening to it. On the positive side, you should be listening, Dad, when your children are talking. And you should not be listening like this. I'm pretending this is a phone since I don't have one. Nothing says that I am listening to you better than eye contact, and not just hearing, but listening. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Ladies, listen to this, please. As men get older, we start, like everybody, maybe start to get a little hard of hearing. And so an issue has come up at my house. Did you hear what I said? No. Especially if I am reading something or the TV's on. So I've asked my wife to simply do this, okay? Let's say that Mike here is me and I'm married, okay? I've asked her to do this. Can I have your attention, please, for a minute? Now, that shouldn't have to be that way, but I'm confessing that that's what happens sometimes. If you get, I made her this promise. If you get my attention, I promise I will listen. But if I'm in the living room and you're in the kitchen and you start talking, there is no guarantee that I'm listening. Okay? Until I hear the raised voice. Did you hear me? No, I didn't. Listen. Be careful, little mouth, what you say. Another thing that's sad to me is how common it's becoming for me to hear Christians use profanity like it's nothing. To use the Lord's name in vain, just to use coarse language. The Bible tells us that there should be no profane talk come out of our mouth. I had a guy I knew when I was in college. He was studying for the ministry. I don't know if he ended up in the ministry or not. But he didn't talk any different than a truck driver. And my dad was a truck driver. I knew how a lot of truck drivers talk. And so one day I just said, I looked at him and I said, "How do you talk like that, Rich?" And his answer was, "They're just words." But they're not just words. People ought to recognize us by the way we talk. And what do we talk about? You know what? Men tend to talk about the things we love, right? Hunting, fishing, race cars, football, baseball, hockey. Often you talk about Jesus. You love Jesus? You ought to be talking about him, especially in your homes with your families. Be careful, little hands, what you do. We need to be men enough to discipline our children with affection. I think one of the problems, and you see it all the time in professional sports, men who grow up without the loving discipline of a father. They've had nobody to teach them how to be men. I have nothing against moms, but they're raised by their mothers. They don't have a father in the house. Nobody to straighten them out when they start to mess up. And all of a sudden you dump a truckload of money in their lap, and so they have no discipline. They have all the money more money than they could possibly spend, but a lot of them end up bankrupt. More money than a normal person could spend with discipline, and bad things happen. And you see it all the time. It happens. It doesn't matter what. For some reason, it doesn't seem to happen a lot in baseball, but it happens in a lot of other sports where there's no man in the house to administer discipline, and so these guys end up being undisciplined and getting in trouble. I read an example a long time ago, and I've used it in various situations, and maybe you've heard this before, of a village where they had killed off most of the adult male elephants for their ivory. And so there were young juvenile male elephants who were wreaking havoc, and they weren't behaving themselves, and they were tormenting the older elephants. And so whoever, park rangers, I don't know what the whole situation, but they went out and transported adult male elephants into the herds. And guess what happened? The juveniles started behaving because the males, young, strong males, adult males, didn't put up with any of their baloney. Young men need fathers who will administer loving discipline. Be a man. Teach your son how to be a man. Anybody read the sign out front today? I know I spend hours and hours trying to think of what to put out there, and then I go out there in the rain and change it, and you don't read it. It says, Dad, a son's first hero and a daughter's first love. I saw within my own family the results of a disengaged father and what happened with his daughters. One of the things I decided with my daughter from the time she was little, and don't take this the wrong way, understand what I mean. I decided that I was going to raise her as if I was dating her. Now guys, what do we do when we're dating a girl? We give them attention, right? We try to win their hearts. We take them out. We buy them gifts. And so I did this with Mary Beth. We would go on dates. She was taught how a man ought to treat you. She was taught what was appropriate and what wasn't. In fact, she likes to tell this story. When she got to be in her teen years, we would go somewhere. We used to do daddy-daughter lunch days. I think we used to take her out of school when she was in elementary school one day a week, and we'd go out for lunch. I don't know if you're allowed to do that stuff anymore. But when she got to be a teenager and started to get to the place where the boys were, paying attention, and we would go on a date, and as we're driving down the car, I'd say, okay, Mary Beth, now we're going to practice. Are you ready? She says, okay. And I would just take my hand over and put it on her knee like this. So now what are you supposed to do? Stop that. I said, no. First of all, I want you to slap my hand as hard as you can. Oh, Dad, I don't want to hurt you. It's all right. So I get, no, Mary Beth Harder, slap myself. Finally, bam! Now let's hear it. Stop that! I said, okay. That is your approach to any guy until I tell you otherwise. I would open the door for her. I would treat her like we were dating. And with the hopes that she would understand what it was like to how a man ought to treat you and pick a good man eventually, which she did in my son-in-law, Justin. Be careful, little feet, where you go. You know, Dad, you increase the chances of your kids becoming regular church attenders exponentially if you go with them instead of doing what my dad did and sending them out the door. It's great for they go with Mom, but it makes a huge difference if Dad goes along too. Have you ever seen a kid put on their dad's shoes? Right? Walk around in it. Well, he or she's gonna follow in your footsteps in a lot of ways. I had to babysit my son Payson yesterday for a little bit while the girls in our family went to a bridal shower for my niece, and my son Aaron was involved with the fireman's parade. And we saw a fire truck, and he said to me, "My daddy's a fireman." He said, he didn't say I'm going to be. He said, "I'm a fireman too." I said, "Oh, you are?" He said, "Yeah, I fight the fires. And when I grow up, I'm going to fight the fires." I said, "Okay." Your kids are watching you. They may or may not follow you in your career, but they are following you in the example you set. This past week, I posted some memories of my dad on Facebook every day. I don't know why. It's been 12 years since he died, and I was kind of missing him. And I'd like to read some of what I wrote to you, okay? My dad was not a perfect man. I don't mean to imply that at all. But some of the things that I've been thinking about that went with this sermon were in my things I was writing, and so I would like to just read it. The first one also involves Mary's dad. Mary and I were raised in very different families. Hers was an undeniable Christian upbringing, while my parents were not saved until later in life. But we found some very similar aspects, especially in relation to our fathers. They loved us and they showed it. Affection was given in liberal doses. Discipline was administered with love. And perhaps the most influential for both of us was our fathers made time for us. If they had a free evening, they stayed home. If they had to run errands, they took us with them. They both would rather be with their children than with friends. For both of us, it made understanding that God is our loving Father so much easier. In Mary's case, it gave her enough self-confidence and boosted her self-esteem so that she never compromised herself just to have a boyfriend. She grew up to be a confident woman who chose a man, me, because she wanted to, not out of some need. Honestly, guys, what's more attractive than a self-confident woman who isn't clingy and needy and high maintenance? Nothing I know of. I'm so thankful to Mary's dad for being the father he was. I and my children are reaping the benefit in my wife and their mother, and also the mother-in-law and grandma in our family. My dad taught me how to be a man, how to treat women, not to make excuses, but make a way, to put my family ahead of job, friends, and outside interests. Though they're now in heaven, we still say Happy Father's Day. Then the next day I wrote 2 pieces of advice from my dad that have served me well, but I confess I haven't always followed them. But the older I get, the more I realize how wise he was. Number 1, do what you said you would do. Integrity. Number 2, when someone shows you what they are, believe them the first time. The next day, how my dad taught me to be punctual. I had a summer job after my freshman year of college. One Friday, I came home from work, took a shower to get ready to go hang out with some friends. While I was in the shower, my friends pulled up out in front of my house. My dad was sitting on the front porch and walked out to the car. He knew all of them and he liked them. He asked them, "What's up, fellas?" They told him they were there to pick me up. He said he asked what time they had told me they were coming. They answered 7 o'clock. He said, "It's 7:05. You guys have to leave." They told him they did not mind waiting. He said, "No, Dawn is late. Leave." I want to emphasize my dad knew all these guys and he liked them. After I showered and got dressed, I came out on the front porch. My dad said, "Your friends were here." I told them to leave. "Why?" He said, "You were late. It's rude to be late. It's arrogant to keep someone waiting for you." Lesson learned and remembered 42 years later. P.S. I spent that evening sitting on the front porch with my dad, listening to the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball game and eating chipped ham sandwiches. If you're not from Western Pennsylvania, you won't know what chipped ham is, but a sandwich with chipped ham and Longhorn cheese and a slice of tomato on Vienna bread, baby, it was a great night. The next night, we were at Olson's Bakery, for bikers at the bakery, and a friend of mine, who nicknamed Rabbi, because he's about that tall and has a beard about that long, he rides a old Honda Goldwing with a sidecar. And my grandchildren, Ashton and Payson, were there, and they got in the sidecar and we took a picture. And I wrote this: "Ashton and Payson in the sidecar brings back memories of my dad and mom on his Harley 74 with my big brother David and me in the sidecar. I was 3 years old. When I got older, I learned the sidecar was borrowed from a friend. My dad didn't use the sidecar very long, but he still took me for rides. I vividly remember sitting in front of him, secure between his arms. I also remember how scared I was when he said it was time for me to ride behind him. It was a big saddle seat with a chrome rail behind the passenger, but I was very afraid. He assured me that I would not fall off. He, of course, was right, and I loved every minute of it. When it came time for me to start riding myself, the 74 was long gone by then, my dad was patient and instilled in me the love of riding as well as respect for the machine and the inherent dangers. He also taught me that it's cheaper to maintain it than it is to fix it. Plus, you'll never get stranded. I apply this advice to everything I have: vehicles, house, marriage. I could tell many stories related to riding with my dad, including racing and riding in the western Pennsylvania strip mines, but suffice it to say, I never ride without thinking of him and saying, "Thank you, Dad." Next night, my dad was a car guy. He told me stories of hunkering down behind the railing. Some of you older guys, listen to this. He told me stories of hunkering down behind the railing on the front porch with his brother when they were kids and guessing the makes of cars by the sound. I love going to car shows with him. He knew things like the first car to have air conditioning. Anybody know? 1940 Packard. And a 39 Ford had a pop-out windshield for ventilation, but the 1940 didn't, and the headlights were different. Most things I've forgotten, but some I retained. Though he never owned a new car, he took pride in the cars he had. They were always clean inside and out. He gave me a lesson in how to wash a car. One car he loved was a 1964 Buick Electra 225, which had every possible option, including an automatic headlight dimmer. They don't even have that on cars today that I know of. It looked like a torpedo on the dashboard and dimmed the headlights when it sensed the car coming in the opposite direction. So imagine my horror when I borrowed it one night and was hit by a drunk driver. I limped the car home, arriving after he had gone to work the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift at U.S. Steel. I was so upset I could not sleep. I didn't even try going to bed. I sat up all night. He walked in the front door from work at 7:15 a.m. and said, "What are you doing up already?" I said, "I have something to show you." He had come in the back door and walked out the front door. He looked at the car and said, "What happened?" I said, "I was in an accident last night." He said, "Was it the other guy's fault?" "Yes." "Was he drunk?" "Yes." "Don't worry about it." He said nothing more to me about it, but 2 days later I overheard him on the phone. "I don't care if you have insurance or not. You are paying for my car." "Yes, you are." "Okay, listen. I'm coming to your house with a baseball bat. I'm going to start breaking things until I bust up enough stuff that equals the value of my car." "Okay then, you have the money? I'll be there in 1 hour." Now think what you will about his tactics. Let me tell you what I think. My dad loved me more than his car, and he was willing to stand up for me. And I'm guessing the drunk driver knew what I knew. My dad did not make empty threats or promises. He did what he said he would do. By the way, he did get the money without having to break anything. Next day. Is it a cliche to say the best way to show someone you love them is T-I-M-E? After all, why would you not want to be with the people you love? As far back as I can remember, my dad made time for me. He invited me to go with him, even if it was just for a ride in the car on a hot summer evening. That being said, it was still an unexpected surprise to me that after my junior year at Roberts Wesleyan College, he flew from Pittsburgh to Rochester just so he could ride home with me. I had my car packed up, picked him up at the Rochester airport, and away we went. I had a CB radio in my car, who didn't back then, and we had a hilarious time talking to the truckers on routes 90 and 79. We bantered with truckers with colorful handles like Nightcrawler and, please excuse me ladies, Seymour Butts, all the way home. We also talked about, well, everything. And this is when he told me, "Don, of all the girls you ever brought to our house," and there were many, "I like that Mary the best." I popped the question to Sweet Mary 4 months later. My dad knew a good catch when he saw her. My mother, my wife. Good call, Dad. Good call. Last one. It's Father's Day, and I've been posting memories all this week of my dad. I don't understand why, but I've been missing him much more than usual lately. My dad went to heaven on November 7th, 2003, almost 12 years ago. So it's not like I haven't had time to grieve. And it's not the anniversary of his death, and it's not his birthday, which is March 18th. Today a friend told me he had a very difficult time about 12 years after his father died, just out of the blue. like I have been. Though I have many more memories I could share, this is my last one for now. My dad helped me find a Honda Trail 90. Anybody remember those? With a centrifugal clutch, 4 straight down, and a dual transmission. When I was 14 years old, I bought it with my own money, but obviously was too young to ride it legally. We would both get on it and ride to the strip mines not far from home. He would get off, put the transmission in the lower setting, and let me ride and have a blast. I became pretty good at hill climbing. We were standing at the top of a pretty big hill, and he decided he would ride down and back up. He got about halfway, and the front wheel came up. He backflipped and tumbled end over end. The bike went to the bottom, but he ended up in a bush that was growing out of the side of the hill. And by the way, it was the only bush growing out of the side of the hill. I slid down the hill as fast as I could. "Are you okay, Dad? Are you okay?" I got to the bush, and he was laughing hysterically. "Well, that was fun. Let's do it again." I was obviously relieved he was okay, and we both kept trying until we conquered that hill. He was not only my dad, but one of the best friends I ever had. I'll never stop missing him, I guess. Happy Father's Day, all you dads. You have more influence on your children than you'll ever realize. There is nothing more valuable you can ever give them than your time. Boys need their dad to learn how to be respectable men. Girls need their dad to learn how to be treated by men. And what I wrote out here, dad is a son's first hero and a daughter's first love. When it comes to daughters, if you are not the number one man in their life, they will find a replacement, and you won't like their choice. Guaranteed. Let's pray. Lord, I know as men we are not perfect, but you are. We will mess up, but you don't. There are, I think, inherent faults and shortcomings in just being a man. In the last 50 years on TV, they have seemed to, and in the media of all kinds, they have seemed to do everything they can to diminish the role of a father in the life of a family. To the point now that we're told that children don't even need a man, don't even need a male influence. And we know that was not your plan. Every child needs a dad and a mom who love you first and love them. And I pray that we would be the people that you want us to be, whether we're parents now or we will be someday. In Jesus' name.